In the year 2378, humanity had stretched its reach across dozens of star systems. Colonies thrived on distant planets, trade routes connected faraway worlds, and exploration ships ventured into uncharted space. But even in this age of discovery, some mysteries remained unsolved. Dr. Ilara Voss sat alone in her dimly lit lab aboard Io station, a remote research outpost orbiting a dying red dwarf star. Her fingers danced over holographic screens filled with streams of data. She was no ordinary scientist. She was a xenolinguist, a specialist in decoding alien languages. For years, her work had been quiet and routine, analyzing fragments of old transmissions or deciphering ancient scripts left behind by long-dead civilizations. But tonight, everything changed. A strange signal had appeared on her monitors just hours earlier. It wasn't like anything she'd ever seen before. Unlike human communications, which relied on structured patterns, this signal pulsed rhythmically, almost like a heartbeat. Bursts of energy followed precise intervals, carrying sequences that resembled language, but not one crafted by humans. Ilara leaned closer to the screen, her heart racing as she ran simulations. Was it natural? A glitch? Or something alive? The signal came from deep space, far beyond the galactic rim where few dared to venture. Its origin lay in an area known only as the Void, a vast expanse shrouded in darkness and mystery. Some called it the edge of the universe. Others whispered it might hold secrets older than time itself. Ilara replayed the signal again and again, isolating sections for analysis. Slowly, she began to notice patterns within the chaos. Mathematical sequences emerged, along with symbols that hinted at meaning. Her eyes widened when she realized what she was looking at: coordinates. Embedded within the signal were directions pointing toward a specific location in the void. "This can't be random," she muttered under her breath, running her hands through her short, dark hair. "Someone, or something, is trying to tell us something." Word of the discovery spread quickly through the station. By morning, a small group of scientists gathered in her lab, their faces a mix of excitement and unease. Dr. Marcus Hale, the station's chief astrophysicist, voiced what everyone else was thinking. "If this is real, we need to report it immediately. If there's intelligent life out there, we have to know." But not everyone shared his optimism. Lieutenant Daxwork, the station's head of security, frowned deeply. "Or it could be a trap. We don't know who or what sent this. What if responding puts us all in danger?" Ilara listened silently, her mind racing. She knew they were right to worry. Humanity's history with alien contact had been fraught with peril, yet she couldn't ignore the thrill of possibility. This signal was different. It felt deliberate, purposeful. Whatever sent it wanted to be found. By evening, the decision was made. The signal would be transmitted to Earth's Unified Fleet Command for further investigation. As Ilara watched the data upload, she felt a strange sense of foreboding. Deep down, she wondered if they were ready for what lay ahead. The void was vast and unforgiving, and the signal carried more than just coordinates. It carried questions that might change everything humanity thought it knew about the universe. The signal from Io's station reached Earth's Unified Fleet Command within hours, thanks to advanced quantum communication systems. Admiral Cal Rennick, a grizzled veteran of countless battles, stood in the command center staring at the holographic display of the mysterious transmission. His sharp blue eyes scanned the data, but his expression remained unreadable. The room buzzed with tension as officers debated what to do next. "This could be nothing," said Commander Lirachen, one of Rennick's top strategists. "It might just be some natural phenomenon, a pulsar or an asteroid field emitting random bursts." Rennick shook his head slowly. "No, this is too precise. Look at these patterns." He pointed to the mathematical sequences embedded in the signal. "Whoever, or whatever, sent this wanted us to find it. And those coordinates, they're not pointing to empty space. There's something out there." The mention of something sent a ripple through the room. Humanity had encountered alien species before, And not all encounters had ended peacefully. Some civilizations were hostile, others indifferent, and a rare few willing to cooperate. But this signal was different. It didn't match any known alien language or technology. That made it unpredictable, and unpredictability meant danger. As if on cue, an urgent message flashed across the main screen. Intelligence reports indicated that the ruthless Vanguard Syndicate, a faction of rogue mercenaries and pirates operating outside Federation law, had intercepted fragments of the signal. Their fleet was already mobilizing toward the void, likely intending to claim whatever lay of the coordinates for themselves. "They're moving fast," muttered Captain Elias Voss, no relation to Ilara, pacing near the back of the room. "If they get there first, we'll lose control of the situation entirely." Admiral Rennick slammed his fist on the table. "Then we move faster. Operation Sentinel starts now." Within days, a massive coalition fleet was assembled under Rennick's command. Ships from across human-controlled space converged at the edge of explored territory, preparing for the long journey into the unknown. Among them was the flagship Aegis Dawn, a state-of-the-art battleship equipped with cutting-edge weaponry and defensive systems. It would serve as the nerve center of the operation. But assembling ships wasn't enough. Rennick knew they needed someone who could decode the signal further, someone who understood alien languages better than anyone else. Reluctantly, he authorized Dr. Ilara Voss's transfer from EO's station to join the mission. When she arrived aboard the Aegis Dawn, she found herself surrounded by soldiers and engineers, none of whom seemed particularly thrilled about having a civilian scientist tagging along. Captain Jarek Solis, the ship's commanding officer, greeted her with thinly veiled skepticism. "Dr. Voss," he said, his tone clipped, "I've read your report. You seem convinced this signal is important. But out here, theories don't keep people alive. Let's hope you're right." Ilara met his gaze evenly. "I didn't ask to come, Captain. But if you want answers, I'm the best chance you've got." As the fleet prepared to depart, whispers spread among the crew about the dangers ahead. Stories of ghost ships and unexplained disappearances in the void fueled their fears. Still, orders were orders, and duty called. With engines roaring to life, the fleet launched into hyperspace, leaving behind the safety of known space. For Ilara, the weight of responsibility pressed heavily on her shoulders. She had uncovered the signal, and now its secrets rested in her hands. Somewhere beyond the galactic rim, something waited, for better or worse, and as the stars blurred past the viewport, she couldn't shake the feeling that humanity was stepping into a story far older than itself. The journey into the void was long and tense. The fleet traveled through hyperspace, their ships linked together in a vast formation that stretched across light years. For days, the only sounds aboard the Aegis Dawn were the hum of engines and the occasional crackle of communication channels. Outside, the stars blurred into streaks of light, a reminder of how far they had ventured from home. Dr. Ilara Voss spent most of her time in the ship's science lab, poring over data about the signal. She worked tirelessly, trying to uncover more clues hidden within its patterns. But as the hours passed, she began to notice something strange. Subtle anomalies in the ship's systems. Navigation readings fluctuated without explanation, and crew members reported hearing faint whispers over the intercom, though no one was speaking. One evening, Captain Jarek Solis entered the lab, his face grim. "We've got reports of equipment malfunctions," he said, leaning against the doorway. "And some of the crew are acting off." Ilara looked up from her work, frowning. "What do you mean?" "They're having nightmares," Solis replied. "Vivid ones, about dark shapes moving in the shadows, voices calling out to them. It's affecting morale." Ilara felt a chill run down her spine. She had experienced similar sensations herself. Moments when she swore she heard fragments of the signal seeping through the walls, whispering words she couldn't quite understand. At first, she dismissed it as stress or fatigue, but now she wasn't so sure. "It could be psychological," she suggested hesitantly. "The unknown can play tricks on the mind." Or she hesitated, unsure if she should voice her growing suspicion, or it might be connected to the signal. Solus raised an eyebrow. You think the signal is doing this? How? I don't know, Elara admitted. But it's not just random noise. It's intelligent. Maybe it's interacting with us somehow, testing us, probing our minds. Before Solus could respond, alarms blared throughout the ship. Red warning lights flashed as the fleet dropped out of hyperspace unexpectedly. The sudden deceleration threw everyone off balance, and shouts echoed through the corridors. What's happening? Solus demanded, rushing to the bridge. On the main view screen, the fleet floated in a sea of darkness. Stars were sparse here, swallowed by the endless expanse of the void. But ahead of them loomed something massive, a swirling vortex of energy that pulsed with an eerie blue glow. It seemed alive, shifting and writhing like a living creature. That's not on any of our charts, muttered Lieutenant Mara Quinn, the ship's navigator. It wasn't there before. Elara stared at the phenomenon, her heart pounding. That's where the coordinates lead, she whispered. Whatever sent the signal, it's coming from inside that thing. Admiral Rennick's voice crackled over the comms. All ships, hold position. We need to assess this carefully. But careful assessment wasn't easy. As the fleet lingered near the vortex, the anomalies grew worse. Equipment failures became frequent, and more crew members reported disturbing dreams. Some claimed they saw shadowy figures walking the halls, disappearing whenever someone tried to approach. Others spoke of hearing their names called softly, as if by a distant voice. Captain Solus turned to Elara, his expression hard. If you're right, if the signal is affecting us, then we need answers. Fast. Because I'm starting to think whatever's waiting for us isn't going to be friendly. Elara nodded, her resolve strengthening. She didn't fully understand what they were dealing with yet, but one thing was clear. The closer they got to the source of the signal, the stronger its influence became. And deep down, she feared they were already too late to turn back. The fleet cautiously approached the swirling vortex, its eerie blue glow casting an otherworldly light across the hulls of the ships. Admiral Rennick ordered a full scan of the anomaly, but the readings were inconclusive. Fluctuating energy signatures, gravitational distortions, and strange electromagnetic pulses made it impossible to determine what lay beyond. Despite the risks, one thing was certain. They had come too far to retreat now. Dr. Elara Voss stood on the bridge of the Aegis Dawn, her eyes fixed on the view screen. The vortex seemed to pulse in rhythm with the signal she had first detected back at EO Station. It was as if the anomaly itself was alive, waiting for them to take the next step. Her hands trembled slightly, though she tried to hide it. She knew that whatever awaited them inside could change everything, or destroy them all. We need to send a team in, Elara said firmly, turning to Captain Solus. If we stay out here, we'll never know what's causing this. Solus frowned, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. You're talking about sending people into an uncharted, unstable phenomenon. That's reckless, even by your standards. It's necessary, Elara countered. The signal led us here for a reason. If we don't investigate, we risk letting the vanguard get ahead of us, or worse, unleashing something we can't control. After a heated debate, Admiral Rennick agreed to authorize a reconnaissance mission. A small team would enter the vortex using a heavily armored shuttle, equipped with advanced sensors and defensive systems. Elara insisted on joining the team, arguing that her expertise would be crucial for interpreting anything they found. Reluctantly, Solus assigned himself as leader of the mission, unwilling to let her go alone. As the shuttle detached from the Aegis Dawn and entered the vortex, the crew braced themselves for the unknown. The interior of the anomaly was unlike anything they had ever seen, a kaleidoscope of shifting colors and shapes, as if reality itself had fractured. Time felt distorted. Seconds stretched into minutes, and voices whispered faintly in their ears, speaking in languages none of them recognized. When they emerged on the other side, They found themselves face to face with a colossal structure floating silently in the void. It was shaped like a jagged ring, its surface covered in glowing runes that pulsed with the same rhythm as the signal. The artifact dwarfed their shuttle, its sheer size making it seem almost godlike. This is impossible," muttered Lieutenant Aaron Cole, the shuttle's pilot, staring wide-eyed at the structure. "How could something like this exist out here?" Ilara leaned forward, her voice trembling with awe. "It's not just a structure, it's a machine. Look at those patterns. They're not random. This thing was built." Against orders, the team decided to land on the artifact, which they dubbed the Nexus. As they stepped onto its metallic surface, they were struck by how alien it felt. The air was cold and heavy, and the ground vibrated faintly underfoot, as if the Nexus were breathing. Strange symbols etched into the walls glowed softly, illuminating labyrinthine corridors that stretched endlessly into darkness. "This place gives me the creeps," muttered Corporal Daxwork, the team's security officer, gripping his weapon tightly. "Feels like we're being watched." Ilara ignored him, her focus entirely on the runes. She began recording them with her handheld scanner, her mind racing as she tried to decipher their meaning. "These aren't just decorations," she murmured. "They're instructions, warnings, maybe." Before she could analyze further, the ground beneath them shuddered violently. A low hum filled the air, growing louder with each passing second. Lights flickered along the walls, and the rooms began to shift, rearranging themselves into new patterns. "We need to leave. Now," Solus barked, grabbing Ilara's arm. But Ilara hesitated, her gaze locked on the changing runes. Something about them felt familiar, as if they were trying to communicate directly with her. Then, without warning, the corridor ahead lit up, revealing a massive doorway engraved with a single, pulsating symbol. "What does it mean?" Solus asked, his voice tense. Ilara swallowed hard. "I think it means, enter." And with that, the doors slid open, revealing a chamber bathed in golden light. Whatever secrets the Nexus held, they were waiting just beyond. The team hesitated at the threshold of the glowing chamber, their breaths shallow and hearts pounding. The golden light spilled out like liquid fire, illuminating the intricate carvings on the walls. Each symbol seemed to pulse with life, as if responding to their presence. Ilara stepped forward cautiously, her scanner trembling in her hand. She couldn't shake the feeling that the Nexus was alive, not just a relic of some ancient civilization, but something far more complex. Captain Solus grabbed her arm, pulling her back slightly. "We don't know what's in there," he growled under his breath. "This could be a trap." Ilara shook her head, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her chest. "It's not a trap. It's waiting for us. Look at these symbols. They're reacting to our movements. This place was designed to interact with intelligent beings." Before Solus could argue further, Corporal Rourke pointed toward the center of the chamber. A pedestal rose from the floor, its surface covered in glowing runes that matched the patterns they had seen earlier. Atop the pedestal rested a crystalline orb, shimmering faintly as if it contained stars within. "That's got to be important," Rourke muttered, taking a cautious step closer. Ilara approached the orb carefully, her eyes scanning the surrounding walls. "This must be the core, the heart of the Nexus. If we can understand how it works, we might finally figure out why the signal brought us here." As she reached out to touch the orb, the entire chamber rumbled violently. The rooms on the walls flared brighter, and the air grew thick with static electricity. Suddenly, panels along the ceiling slid open, revealing rows of dormant drones suspended in alcoves. Their sleek, insect-like forms gleamed menacingly in the golden light. "What did you do?" Solus demanded, raising his weapon. "I didn't." Ilara started, but before she could finish, the drones sprang to life. With mechanical precision, they detached from their alcoves and descended into the chamber, their glowing red eyes locking onto the intruders. "Hostiles incoming," Rourke shouted, firing a shot at the nearest drone. The blast ricocheted harmlessly off its metallic shell. "We need to fall back," Solus barked, pushing Ilara toward the exit. But the doorway behind them sealed shut with a deafening hiss, trapping them inside. Ilara's mind raced as the drones advanced. These weren't ordinary machines. They moved with purpose, almost like predators hunting prey. She glanced back at the pedestal and realized the truth. Activating the orb hadn't been an accident. The Nexus had awakened its guardians to protect its secrets. "There!" Ilara yelled, spotting a narrow passageway branching off to the side. "That way." The team sprinted toward the passage, dodging blasts from the drone's energy weapons. The corridor twisted and turned unpredictably, forcing them to rely on instinct rather than logic. Behind them, the hum of the drones grew louder, closing the gap. "This isn't going to work," Work panted, reloading his weapon. "They're too fast." Solus gritted his teeth, scanning their surroundings. "We need to lose them somehow." "Split up." "No," Ilara snapped. "If we separate, we'll die. Stay together." Just as the drones rounded the corner, Ilara noticed a control panel embedded in the wall. Without hesitation, she slammed her palm against it, triggering a heavy blast door to slide down, sealing off the corridor behind them. The sound of the drones colliding with the barrier echoed through the hallway, followed by an eerie silence. For a moment, they caught their breath, leaning against the cold metal walls. But Ilara knew this was only temporary. The Guardians wouldn't stop until they eliminated the threat, or until the team escaped. "They're still coming," Solus said grimly. "And next time, we might not get lucky." Ilara nodded, her resolve hardening. "Then we'd better find a way out, and fast." As they pressed onward, the weight of their discovery settled over them. The Nexus wasn't just a machine. It was a fortress, built to guard something far greater. And whatever it was, it didn't want them to leave alive. The team moved swiftly through the labyrinthine corridors of the Nexus, their footsteps echoing against the metallic walls. Every shadow seemed to shift unnaturally, and the faint hum of the artifact systems filled the air like a constant reminder of its power. Ilara led the way, her scanner flickering as she tried to map a route back to the shuttle. Behind her, Captain Solus kept watch, his weapon raised and ready for another attack from the Guardians. "We're running out of time," Rourke muttered, glancing over his shoulder nervously. "Those things are probably already finding a way around that door. They won't stop until we're dead or gone." Solus replied grimly. "Keep moving." Ilara paused at an intersection, her eyes darting between two branching paths. The scanner's display was erratic, overwhelmed by the Nexus's energy field. She clenched her fists in frustration. "I can't get a clear reading. We're flying blind." Before anyone could respond, a deep rumble shook the structure. Lights along the walls flickered violently, and the ground beneath them vibrated with increasing intensity. Then came the sound, a distant but unmistakable roar of engines. "The fleet," Solus exclaimed, rushing to a nearby viewport carved into the wall. Outside, the vast expanse of space revealed the horrifying truth. Dozens of ships bearing the black and red insignia of the Vanguard Syndicate had arrived, surrounding the fleet loyal to Earth's unified command. "They've caught up to us," Rourke said, his voice tight with dread. "And they brought reinforcements." Through the glass, explosions lit up the void as the Vanguard launched a surprise assault. Their sleek, heavily armed vessels swarmed the Coalition fleet, unleashing barrages of plasma fire. Ships on both sides exchanged volleys, filling the darkness with streaks of light and debris. Amidst the chaos, one massive vessel stood out, the Iron Talon, flagship of Commander Silas Forn, leader of the Vanguard. "He's here for the Nexus," Ilara whispered, gripping the edge of the viewport. "He knows what it is, or at least, he thinks he does." Solus turned to her sharply. "Then we need to warn Admiral Rennick. If the Vanguard breaches this place, they'll unleash whatever's inside." Ilara finished, her face pale. And I don't think even they realize how dangerous that would be. As if on cue, alarms blared throughout the Nexus. A new set of symbols appeared on the walls, glowing brighter than before. The artifact seemed to sense the battle raging outside, responding with increased activity. Panels slid open, revealing more drones preparing to defend their domain. "We're not getting out of here without a fight," Rourke growled, reloading his weapon. "Let's just hope the fleet holds long enough for us to make it back." But escaping wouldn't be easy. As they rounded a corner, they were met with a fresh wave of Guardians, their red eyes locking onto the intruders. This time, however, the machines weren't alone. From deeper within the Nexus emerged something larger, a towering construct resembling a spider-like mech, its limbs tipped with razor-sharp claws. "Fall back," Solus shouted, firing a burst of shots at the creature. It barely flinched, advancing with terrifying speed. Ilara spotted a control panel near the ceiling and pointed urgently. "That console. It might activate a defense system." Without hesitation, Solus boosted her up onto his shoulders so she could reach the panel. Her fingers danced across the interface, triggering a surge of energy that caused sections of the floor to collapse, creating a makeshift barrier between them and the mech. The drones hesitated, scanning the gap, giving the team precious seconds to retreat. "This thing doesn't want us leaving any more than the Vanguard does," Ilara panted as they sprinted down another corridor. "It's protecting something, and whatever it is, it's worth dying for." As they neared the exit, the sounds of battle grew louder. Explosions rocked the Nexus itself, causing chunks of the ceiling to fall. Through the chaos, one thing became clear. Humanity's survival depended not only on defeating the Vanguard, but also on understanding the true purpose of the Nexus. The team burst out of the Nexus and into the harsh light of space, gasping for breath as they scrambled toward their shuttle. Behind them, the colossal artifact loomed ominously, its glowing runes flickering erratically. The battle between the unified fleet and the Vanguard raged on, filling the void with fiery explosions and streaks of plasma fire. Ships spiraled out of control, their hulls torn apart by relentless barrages. "We're not going to make it," Rourke shouted, diving behind a chunk of debris as a stray blast narrowly missed them. "The Vanguard's cutting through our lines." Ilara ignored him, her focus locked on the Nexus. She clutched her scanner tightly, her mind racing. The artifact wasn't just defending itself. It was reacting to the conflict outside. Its energy output had surged, and the symbols etched into its surface now pulsed faster than ever before. Whatever secrets it held were tied directly to the battle unfolding around it. Captain Solus grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the shuttle. "We need to get back to the fleet. We can't do anything from here." "No," Ilara said firmly, shaking off his grip. Her voice was steady but urgent. "If we leave now, the Vanguard will breach the Nexus. They'll activate whatever's inside without understanding the consequences. We have to stop them." "And how exactly do you plan to do that?" Solus snapped, his patience wearing thin. "We're outnumbered, outgunned, and running out of time." Ilara hesitated, then turned to face him. "By finishing what I started. There's a way to use the Nexus against them, to turn its own systems into a weapon. But it's risky." "Risky? That's an understatement," Rourke interjected, ducking as another explosion sent shrapnel flying past. "What happens if this goes wrong?" "If it goes wrong," Ilara admitted grimly, "we might end up destroying the Nexus. And ourselves along with it." Solus stared at her, weighing the options. He knew she was right. Retreating wouldn't solve anything. If the Vanguard gained control of the artifact, humanity would face an even greater threat. Finally, he nodded. "Do it. But we're doing this together." Back inside the Nexus, the team fought their way through waves of Guardians, using every trick they could think of to stay alive. The spider-like mech pursued them relentlessly, its claws slicing through walls as it closed in. At one point, Rourke sacrificed his position to lure several drones away, buying the others precious seconds to reach the central chamber. When they arrived, Ilara immediately set to work at the pedestal where the crystalline orb still rested. The runes surrounding it glowed brighter as she interfaced her scanner with the artifact's core. Lines of alien code scrolled across her screen, each sequence unlocking new layers of the Nexus's programming. "It's incredible," she murmured, awestruck. "This thing isn't just a machine. It's alive. It's been waiting for someone to awaken it." Less gawking, more hacking. Solus barked, keeping watch at the entrance as the sound of approaching drones grew louder. Finally, Ilara found what she was looking for, a subroutine buried deep within the system. Activating it would overload the Nexus's defenses, unleashing a massive energy surge capable of disabling nearby ships, including those belonging to the Vanguard. But there was no guarantee it would spare their own fleet. "This is it," she said, her finger hovering over the activation button. "Once I trigger this, there's no turning back." "Do it," Solus ordered, his voice firm despite the tension in his eyes. As Ilara pressed the button, the entire structure trembled violently. The golden light intensified, flooding the chamber and spilling out into space. Outside, the Vanguard fleet faltered as their systems began to fail. Ships listed helplessly, their weapons rendered useless. But the surge didn't stop there. Cracks spread across the Nexus's surface, and the ground beneath them buckled. The artifact was breaking apart. "We need to go, now," Solus yelled, grabbing Ilara's arm. They sprinted toward the exit, the Nexus collapsing around them. Just as they reached the shuttle, the artifact erupted in a blinding explosion of light and energy. The shockwave rippled outward, scattering debris and silencing the battlefield. For a moment, all was still. Then, from the wreckage of the Nexus, a shadowy form emerged, a massive, swirling entity that seemed to defy the laws of physics. It hovered silently, observing the remnants of the fleets below. "What is that?" Rourke whispered, staring in awe. Ilara's voice was barely audible. "I think we just woke something up." The shadowy form loomed over the battlefield, its presence both awe-inspiring and terrifying. It was vast, larger than any ship in the fleet, and composed of shifting, translucent energy that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. Streams of light spiraled within it, forming patterns that resembled galaxies spinning in slow motion. For a moment, all fighting ceased as both the unified fleet and the Vanguard stared in stunned silence at the entity. "What is that thing?" Admiral Rennick demanded from the bridge of the Aegis Dawn, his voice barely containing his shock. "Is it part of the Nexus?" Ilara stood frozen in the shuttle, her eyes locked on the entity. Her mind raced as she processed what she had uncovered in the artifact's core systems. She remembered the holographic projections they had seen earlier, scenes of an ancient war between two civilizations. One side wielded unimaginable power, while the other fought desperately to contain it. This was what they had been trying to imprison. "It's not just part of the Nexus," Ilara whispered, her voice trembling. "It is the Nexus, or at least, what the Nexus was built to hold." Captain Solus turned to her sharply. "You mean that thing was trapped inside, and we just let it out?" "I didn't know." Ilara shot back defensively, though guilt gnawed at her. The signal, it wasn't just a warning. It was a cry for help. Someone wanted us to come here, to free it. As if responding to her words, the entity began to move. Its form shifted and expanded, tendrils of energy reaching out toward the ships below. Then, without warning, a deep, resonant voice echoed through space, not through comms or speakers, but directly in everyone's minds. "I am Aetherian," the voice declared, calm yet commanding. "Once worshipped as a god, now freed from my bonds. You have awakened me, mortals. Speak your purpose, or face annihilation." Panic erupted across the fleets. Crew members scrambled to respond, their communications channels flooded with frantic voices. On board the Iron Talon, Commander Silas Vorn stepped forward, his expression unreadable. He raised his hands in a gesture of peace, addressing the entity. "Great Aetherian," he said, his tone smooth and calculated. "We are explorers, seekers of knowledge and power. We came here to learn from you, to harness your strength for the betterment of our people." Ilara clenched her fists, anger bubbling inside her. He's lying. He wants to control it. Solus placed a hand on her shoulder. "We can't stop him alone. Let's see how this plays out." To everyone's surprise, Aetherian responded, "Your words carry deception, mortal. I see your desires, to conquer, to dominate. Such greed led to my imprisonment long ago. Yet you stand before me now, unrepentant. Why should I spare you?" Vorn hesitated, clearly unnerved by the entity's insight. Before he could reply, Ilara stepped out of the shuttle, standing exposed in the void. Her suit's external speakers amplified her voice so the entire fleet could hear. "Aetherian," she called out, her voice steady despite her fear. "You're right about them. They seek only destruction. But not all of us are like that. Some of us came here because we wanted answers, because we believe there's more to existence than war and conquest." The entity paused, its glowing form swirling as if considering her words. "You speak truthfully, child, but honesty alone does not grant salvation. Tell me, why should I trust humanity after what your ancestors did?" Ilara swallowed hard, knowing the weight of her response. "Because we've learned. We've made mistakes, yes, but we've also grown. If you give us a chance, we'll prove ourselves worthy. Not by wielding your power, but by understanding it." For a long moment, Aetherian was silent. Then it spoke again, its voice softer this time. "Very well. I will offer you a choice, mortals. Ally with me and reshape the galaxy together, or face oblivion. Decide wisely." As the entity retreated slightly, the battlefield fell into tense stillness. Humanity's fate hung in the balance, and every decision mattered. Ilara knew one thing for certain. Aetherian wasn't just offering a partnership, it was testing them. And failure meant extinction. The silence that followed Aetherian's declaration was deafening. Across the fleets, crews exchanged uneasy glances, their minds racing with the implications of the entity's ultimatum. For Commander Silas Vorn and the Vanguard, it was an opportunity too tempting to ignore. A chance to wield godlike power and dominate the galaxy. But for Admiral Rennick and the Unified Fleet, it was a moral quandary. Could humanity be trusted with such immense responsibility? Or would accepting Aetherian's offer lead them down the same destructive path as the civilization that had imprisoned it? Ilara knew there was another way. She studied the data from her earlier scans of the Nexus, piecing together fragments of its programming. One detail stood out. The artifact hadn't been designed solely as a prison. It was also a failsafe. If the Nexus were destroyed, Aetherian would dissipate harmlessly, unable to maintain its physical form in this dimension. It wasn't a perfect solution. Destroying the Nexus might mean losing the knowledge it contained, but it was the only way to ensure Aetherian couldn't fall into the wrong hands. "We can't let Vorn control it," Ilara said urgently, turning to Captain Solus aboard the shuttle. "If he gets close enough to negotiate further, we're finished." Solus frowned, his jaw tightening. "And how do you propose we stop him? The fleet's barely holding together as it is." "There's one option left," Ilara replied, her voice steady despite the weight of what she was about to suggest. "I need to go back inside the Nexus. There's a self-destruct sequence buried deep in its core systems. If I trigger it, we can neutralize Aetherian before anyone else makes a move." "You're talking about suicide," Solus snapped, stepping closer to her. "You'll never make it out alive." "I don't have a choice," Ilara shot back, meeting his gaze without flinching. "If I don't do this, billions will die. This isn't just about us. It's about everyone who depends on us to protect them." Before Solus could argue further, alarms blared across the battlefield. The Vanguard fleet had regrouped, launching a renewed assault on the Unified Fleet. Their ships surged forward, weapons blazing, clearly intent on reaching Aetherian first. Amidst the chaos, Vorn's voice crackled over the comms. "Stand aside, or perish. Aetherian belongs to those bold enough to claim it." Admiral Rennick responded immediately, rallying his forces. "Hold the line. We can't let them get through." Explosions lit up the void as both sides clashed fiercely, each determined to secure dominance over the entity. "Time's running out," Ilara muttered, strapping a portable detonator to her belt. She turned to Solus, her expression softening. "I'm sorry. I know this isn't fair to you, or to anyone else, but someone has to do it." To her surprise, Solus shook his head firmly. "Not alone. If you're going back in there, I'm coming with you. You've got guts, Doc, but guts won't save you if something goes wrong." For a moment, Ilara hesitated, then nodded. Together, they leaped back toward the crumbling remains of the Nexus, dodging blasts and debris as they fought their way inside. The structure groaned under the strain of its own collapse, walls buckling and floors collapsing beneath their feet. Guardians still roamed the corridors, relentless even as their home fell apart around them. Reaching the central chamber, Ilara worked frantically at the pedestal, reactivating dormant systems to access the self-destruct protocol. Behind her, Solus held off waves of drones, his weapon firing non-stop until it overheated. Finally, the console lit up, displaying a countdown timer. "It's done," Ilara breathed, relief washing over her. "Now we just need to." A massive explosion rocked the chamber, sending both of them sprawling. Through the smoke, the spider-like mech emerged once more, its glowing eyes locking onto them. Trapped, with no clear escape route, Ilara activated her comms one last time. "This is Dr. Ilara Voss," she said, her voice calm but resolute. "To everyone listening, remember this moment. Remember why we fight. Not for power, but for survival. For hope." As the mech advanced, the countdown reached 0. A blinding flash consumed the Nexus, and everything within it. The explosion that consumed the Nexus was unlike anything humanity had ever witnessed. It began as a brilliant flash of white light, so intense it blinded sensors and cameras across the battlefield. Then came the shockwave, a surge of energy that rippled outward, scattering ships like leaves in a storm. The remnants of the artifact disintegrated into nothingness, leaving behind only an eerie silence. For a moment, no one moved. Crews aboard the surviving ships stared at the empty void where the Nexus, and Aetherian, had once been. The entity's voice no longer echoed in their minds, its presence extinguished along with the structure that had contained it. Humanity's greatest threat, and perhaps its greatest opportunity, was gone. On board the Aegis Dawn, Admiral Rennick stood frozen on the bridge, his face etched with exhaustion and sorrow. Reports poured in from across the fleet, heavy casualties, crippled vessels, and countless lives lost. But amidst the devastation, there was also relief. The Vanguard fleet had been decimated by the blast, their flagship reduced to drifting wreckage. Commander Silas Vorn was presumed dead, his ambitions buried alongside the Nexus. "Admiral," Lieutenant Quinn said softly, breaking the silence, "we've confirmed Dr. Voss and Captain Solus didn't make it out." Rennick closed his eyes briefly, bowing his head. He hadn't always agreed with Ilara's methods or her relentless determination, but he couldn't deny the courage she had shown. She had sacrificed everything to ensure Aetherian wouldn't fall into the wrong hands. And Solus, though they had clashed often, the captain had proven himself loyal to the end. "They saved us," Rennick murmured finally, his voice heavy with emotion. "Let's not forget that." Back on Earth, news of the mission spread quickly. Monuments were erected in honor of those who had given their lives, including Ilara and Solus. Their names became synonymous with bravery and selflessness, inspiring future generations to strive for understanding over conquest. Speeches were made, stories told, and lessons learned, but none could fully capture the weight of what had transpired in the void. Months later, as life slowly returned to normal, Admiral Rennick found himself reflecting on the events. Sitting alone in his office, he replayed Ilara's final transmission in his mind. Her words lingered long after the signal faded. Remember why we fight, not for power, but for survival. For hope. Those words haunted him, yet they also gave him purpose. Humanity had survived this trial, but Rennick knew the galaxy still held mysteries far beyond their comprehension. Somewhere out there, other signals waited to be discovered, other civilizations, other dangers, other opportunities. The journey ahead would be fraught with challenges, but it would also bring growth. If humanity could learn from its mistakes, it might yet carve out a brighter future among the stars. As he gazed out at the night sky, a faint blip appeared on distant listening posts. A new signal, faint but unmistakable. Its origin was unknown, its meaning unclear, but one thing was certain. The universe was vast, and humanity's story was far from over. And so, under the watchful gaze of the cosmos, humanity took its first steps toward a new dawn, one built not on fear or greed, but on the fragile yet enduring spark of hope.